First of all, I'd like to thank you for the invitation to Riga. It's a very beautiful town, and of course, it's an honor of me to take part in this very interesting conference. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I missed the fourth one of artists, Henryk Hechtkopf. It wasn't depend on me, sorry. But I'd like to present Tadeusz Bornstein, Gela Seksztajn, and Aleksander Bogen. The art created by the Jews during the Holocaust is an exceptional phenomenon for many reasons, as everybody knows. The time and circumstances of the work's creation and art functions, the way in which they survived, material, technique, and artistic expression, and also considering the personal fate of the artists and their attitude to the reality surrounding them. It seems that nowadays, when we already have a lot of basic studies containing documented catalogs of works, the most interesting topic of analysis is the issues concerning the creators and their art, that is, relationship with their fate during the war, transformations of identity, and artistic attitude. According to my research on the work of painters connected with the territory of Poland, particularly with Warsaw, in the 1915 I published a book entitled Jewish Artists in Warsaw 1939 to 1945. So I'd like to publish it in English in the future. So, according to my research on the work of painters connected with the territory of Poland, particularly with Warsaw, according to the function criterion, we can distinguish a few basic types of art. Art as a document of the Holocaust, and art as a form of struggle with the Germans. In this slide, you can see at the most expressive works made in the ghetto by young Witold Levinson. He was a pre-war student at the Academy of Fine Art in Warsaw. So he wanted to document the terrifying reality of the ghetto, mainly. And another one, there are works by Halina Ołomucka. Those works are a part of the collection of Yad Vashem Institute in Jerusalem. And she also wanted to document the reality, and she also stated that it was her fight against German also. And in this slide, I present a few examples of the underground press. They are in the collection of Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw. They are a part of Ringelblum archive, of course. Okay. Art as a form of escape from the tragic reality. And art as a form of saving from oblivion the Jewish community, its output and cultural heritage. In this slide, I present works by Roman Kramsztyk. He was completely assimilated. He lived in France, and he belonged to École de Paris. and unfortunately he was forced to stay in the Warsaw Ghetto. And he was forced also to change his attitude toward reality, to his artistic attitude also. And mainly he portrayed their friends in the ghetto, and in the middle there is a sketch of for the portrait of Adam Czerniakow. He was mentioned in the beginning of our conference. Apart from those mentioned, for example, in the Warsaw Ghetto there was also the so-called official art performed on behalf of the Judenrat or Utilitarian commissioned by the financial elites of the ghetto. And my colleagues said a few words about it, I think, so everything is clear. Okay. In my today's speech, I'd like to present the profiles of three artists whose work is representative of the above-mentioned basic types of Holocaust art. Both the outrage that shaped the worldview and artistic attitude of each of them, and their fate during World War II were different, which was reflected in their work. Two of the artists live in the Warsaw Ghetto and died during its liquidation or in the ghetto uprising in 1943. The memory of them survived thanks to the preserved works, archives, and accounts of people who had been close to them. The third one survived and continued their artistic path. Let's move to the first one. The first one is Tadeusz Bornstein. He was a talented poet and painter. He came from an assimilated family of wealthy industrialists from Tomaszów Mazowiecki. In 1937, he began studies at the Academy of Fine Arts in Krakow and had just begun his artistic career. So he was a very young person during the Second World War. He participated in exhibitions and wrote poems. After the outbreak of World War II, until summer 1941, he and his parents had been staying in the so-called eastern borderlands of the Second Polish Republic, which was annexed by the USSR in 1939, in August. He stayed in Lwów and Białystok. At the time, he participated in exhibitions organized by Soviet authorities. When German troops entered there in June 1941, they escaped to the general government to the Warsaw Ghetto. They lived in the so-called small ghetto in its main thoroughfare, Sienna Street. We know that he was living in isolation, suffering with depression, but he would still create. He wrote poetry, painted views of the ghetto streets and still lifes, and the Majda family that lived at 61 Grzybowska Street in the so-called Aryan side, of course, helped him. The family members were Bogdana, Bronisław, he was a messenger of the tax office to the ghetto, and Aleksander, a friend from his school years. They tried to persuade Tadeusz to go onto the Aryan side, but he refused due to his parents. Unfortunately, he was murdered during the so-called liquidation action in September 1942. Almost all members of his family perished during the Holocaust, as you can read above. and most of his artistic achievements were destroyed. A few poems and a narrative poem, as well as a description, only description, the artist's, his works and the artist's personality and his fate have survived, which thanks to the courtesy of Bogdana Majdamis, were handed over to collection to the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw. From the point of view of the reflections on the art of the Holocaust, the most important is the presentation of his attitude in the ghetto's extreme conditions, in the context of issues associated with identity. The artist fully identified himself with Poland and its intellectual elite. He wrote his poetry in Polish, and in the ghetto poems which have survived, he uses the codes of meaning proper to European culture, for example, to the Napoleonic Wars, Lord Byron, or the Greeks' uprising against Turkey in 1830. His reaction to the reality of the ghetto this is Bogdana. She was an actress, well-known actress in Poland, and on the right side there is his portrait made by Gela Seksztajn, probably in the ghetto. His reaction to the reality of the ghetto was characteristic of a representative of the elite, assimilated elite, of course. It was an escape into a sphere capable of protecting them from contact with the tragedy taking place around them. In his case, it was poetry, painting, and religious. As far as painting is concerned, we know that during his studies he belonged to the circle of the colorists. He was also a fan of the French post-impressionism, especially of Van Gogh. As I mentioned, the artist tried to continue his artistic activity in the ghetto. His friend Bogdana supplied him with paints. Unfortunately, he didn't hand over his works to her. Similarly to his poetry, he would seek in painting liberation from the oppression of reality. Like many artists, companions of his misery, he preferred the healing power of art to its documentary functions. Bogdana recalls his tremendous emotion with which he welcomed the album of Van Gogh, Van Gogh's reproduction, which I managed to convey to him during the time of extreme misery and hunger in the ghetto. We also owe to her memories a handful of information about his painting. They were still life, she wrote, different variants of set table, but I hadn't seen anything as beautiful as those in Polish painting. It seems to me that they were a specific and very individual continuation of Impressionism. Crystal objects, glasses and bottles with water penetrated by the sun rays were instilled serenity that for me, who knew his life, was incomprehensible. Several such topics contrasted alarmingly with gypsy tablecloths, black background with bright flowers. But she also wrote, there were 3 or 4 landscapes from the ghetto in the folder. Gray, muddy, terrifying. The fragment quoted above shows that Bornstein also tried to face to the ghetto's reality to preserve its image and the feelings it evoked. The painter's works didn't survive, as I've mentioned, despite the efforts of Bogdana, who took their more than 20 works by him to her flat in the Aryan side, but unfortunately they burned during the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, so we have nothing. According to Rahela Auerbach, a writer and journalist from the ghetto, such an ambivalent attitude was typical of artists imprisoned in the closed district. This is a quotation. I remember how one of them asked to record the tragedy of the ghetto by her. Answered me that then it was necessary to paint bright, sunny things that would give the artist and the viewer the opportunity to escape from the terrifying reality. And when the current reality was over, it would be possible to return to it from retrospection. And nevertheless, each one of them had full portfolios of contemporary works that unfortunately were lost to a large extent. This is the end of quotation. Let's move to the second person, Gela Seksztajn. She was associated with Warsaw, and before the war, she was an insignificant artist. Frankly saying, she was an amateur. But she is currently one of the most well-known figures in the art of the Holocaust, owing to the fact that more than 300 of her works, together with the biography, the testament of hers and her husband, Israel Lichtenstein, he was a member of Onek Shabbat group, clandestine group in the Warsaw Ghetto, constitute a part of the so-called archive of the Warsaw Ghetto. Since 1999, it is on UNESCO's Memory of the World Register. Her history is well known, I hope, but it's worth recalling, however, that her environment, education, and political views were totally different than those of Bornstein. First of all, she was associated with the Yiddish culture, but in her adult life, she wrote in Polish. She came from a working-class family, completed her primary school under the patronage of CISZO, Centralne Jiddische Schulorganizacje, at 68 Nowolipki Street. This place is a very important place because this is a place where the first part of Ringelblum archive was founded. Her talent was discovered by the writer Israel Joshua Singer, a brother of a novelist, and thanks to him, she joined the Circle of Association of Jewish Writers and Journalists in Warsaw. She studied for only 2 months at the Academy of Fine Art in Krakow. But since 1931, she had regularly participated in exhibitions of Jewish artists that were organized in the capital. And she belonged to the two associations, the Association of Jewish Artists and the Jewish Society for the Promotion of Fine Art. So she was devoted to the Jewish culture. And in 1938, she married Israel Lichtenstein, and she worked in Jewish schools teaching children drawing and handicraft, and of course, she painted also. Okay. She, before the Second World War, she prepared works for the exhibition entitled The Jewish Child, but of course this exhibition wasn't organized because of lack of time, I think. So have a look at those pictures. They are very bright, and the children are happy in these pictures. So it's very important to the other side, the other part of my lecture. After the war, after the war broke out, they found themselves with Israel, of course, in the ghetto. Just before its closure, on 4th November 1940, she gave birth to her daughter Margolit. In the ghetto, Israel, apart from the work at Oneg Shabbat, was active in welfare organizations and belonged to the kitchen management of school at 68 Nowolipki Street. Gela taught drawing there. She prepared exhibitions of her pupils' works. She made costumes and decoration for performances, including to the seasons, staged at Femina Cinema in May 1942. She was known and appreciated for her commitment, and in this year, she received an award from Judenrat chairman Adam Czerniakow. After the liquidation action, she was staying with her daughter in the residual ghetto, and both of them probably perished during the uprising in April or May 1943. Her attitude towards the reality of the ghetto was very clearly stated in the testament. She wrote, "I cannot convey the details of our terrible fate, the great tragedy of our nation. I leave it to my colleagues, the Jewish writers." Avoiding documenting the tragedy, the artist turned toward life, looking for the positive aspects. This also confirmed by portraits made by her in the ghetto. There are only a few of them after a formal and thematic analysis qualified her self-portrait, the portraits of her husband and daughter. You can see those. And of course, among others, friends among others, for example, a Folman, a pediatrician who worked at the same school, sketches showing children, cigarette sailor, and free gouache paintings. This is her self-portrait, and the photographs took maybe in the early 1940. And those pictures depicted girls, the same girls who she portrayed before the war in 1938. And in my opinion, they were made in the ghetto, of course, because of dark and cold colors and shadows behind the figures. Of course, they are small beggars, and it's evidently connected with the ghetto. Okay, so Okay, let's move because of short time. Let's move to the Aleksander Bogen, the third one. I want to show you. He was a completely different person because he was connected with Vilna. Of course, his family was connected with the Jewish culture, and he was a Zionist. He was a member of Hashomer Hatzair before the Second World War. And during the World War II, he was in the ghetto, in the Vilnius ghetto, and he escaped from the ghetto, and under the pseudonym of Shura, he joined to the underground organization, Vereinigte Partisanerorganisation, and he fought against Germans with partisans near Lake Naroch forests. And what else? He was a very brave soldier, as you know, probably, and he survived, and he was a very famous artist in Israel, and a very outstanding artist, of course. What can I say more? Maybe. This is a quotation from his testimony, and he stated that he had two reasons to draw his brother in arms or people from the ghetto also, because he also worked, drew drawings in the ghetto previously. And he had two reasons. Of course, he wanted to save from oblivion his brothers in arms, and he wanted to document a tragedy of Holocaust. And I think the third reason was he wanted to show that Jewish partisans, because they were Jewish partisans also in his troop, they fought against German. It was very important, and this fact was very important to the Israeli propaganda also, and to Polish propaganda after the Second World War. So I'd like to show you. A few examples of his works. They belong to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, mostly. They are made in the ghetto, and this is a very important scene of his works, and because he was graduated in Vilna Faculty of Fine Arts at the University in Vilna in 1947, and he stated that this painting, like this sketch, was his saying goodbye to the Holocaust. But during his life, he returned to those subjects, as you can see. For example, The Last Family, created in 1996. So he still remembered the Holocaust and returned to those subjects. For example, this sketch made in the forest, I think, in 1943, he returned to this subject in 80s. So he, like other survivors, artist survivor who survived, he returned, during his life, he returned to the Holocaust subject. Thank you for your attention.
So we already switched to another topic of the Holocaust memory. So very short questions or remarks. because actually we don't have time for that.
I just one short remark. He was with Soviet partisans.
Yes,
This
I
is
know. Yes, I
important
know.
To the
Yeah.
public, maybe.
It was
Belarusian,
because of short
not
time,
Jewish.
you know, yes. He was a Soviet partisan. He was a member of Soviet partisans, yeah, group. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.